All right. Here we're live on YouTube, and you have Bruce Rawles and Lynn Johnson, and we're here reading Absence from Felicity um, by Kenneth Wapnick, PhD. And it's a story of the scribing of A Course in Miracles. Uh, and Basically, it's about Helen Schuckman. But we're learning so much about Helen and Bill and even stuff from Ken, about Ken. And so it's
and
like,
and us.
and us. Yeah, yeah. And us. Hey, Connie, welcome. All right. So
Hi.
I'm going to go ahead and put the reading up in the room. Here we go. And I think we're still reading. We've been reading the notes, Bill's notes.
Yep, this is
Bill's.
chapter 10, the scribe in the scribing of A Course in Miracles, and the continuation and conclusion of the course. We read a couple of pages last week, and now we're on the bottom of page 325 in the print version that I have.
Okay, so since you have to leave early, do you want to start reading?
Oh, sure, sure. And as Lynn pointed out, we're reading Absence from Felicity, the story of Helen Schuckman and her scribing of A Course in Miracles by Kenneth Wapnick, PhD. And Lynn has the digital version up on the screen, and I have the print version in front of me. And where I had us leaving off was a good stopping point. So rather than back ample as we often do, I'm just going to start in with the last paragraph on page 325, um, which is on May 31st, 1967. Helen was in the midst of another crisis, and Jesus' answer to her was a special message, which is also not in the notebooks at all. Thus, either Helen dictated it to Bill directly from her own inner hearing, or else she took it down on a separate sheet of paper that no longer exists. It was, turn the page, 326, originally placed in its proper temporal sequence in the section now known as, quote, weakness and defensiveness, unquote, between the words, uh, quote, and all uncertainty is doubt about yourself, unquote, and, quote, how weak is fear, unquote. It was later put in chapter 18 as the section, quote, I need do nothing, unquote, where the message is reproduced almost word for word. Helen's crisis, which on an external level was literally a non-event, revolved around a threatened union strike that would have involved the elevator operators in Helen's building. Boy, I know Ken has told this story a bunch of times, but it's a fun one and an instructive one, isn't it? She and Louis lived on the 16th floor, and Helen's fear was that the strike would begin at a time when she and Louis would be separated, one of them in the apartment and the other down below. Since in Helen's mind, walking up or down 16 flights of stairs meant instant cardiac arrest for either her or Louis, she was beside herself at the imminent threat of separation. Well, there's the word, the key word, right? Separation. Having thus defined the problem, her solution was obvious and logical. She and Louis would move to a nearby hotel. They did, where they remained for a week, never knowing that the strike was called off even before it had begun. Well, isn't that a great symbolism? You know, the tiny mad idea was over the instant it was hatched in our split mind, right? So how silly is that? But then we made up a whole world to hide out from this strike that we instigated against God, basically, that never happened.
Oh, it's
How's that
hilarious.
for tying the metaphor together?
I think it's perfect, actually. I think they went to a hotel and hung out at a hotel and never knew what actually had happened. Uh,
Uh-huh.
but her
Or what had
idea,
never happened.
what had never happened exactly.
Yeah,
But her idea that, this thing means death.
right.
One of us is going to die if they strike on the elevator operators strike.
Hmm.
So we've got to go protect ourselves. We got to run away and hide somewhere because, uh,
Prodigals,
yeah, yeah, it's hilarious.
isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. So, and I've heard Kim tell that story too before. And,
Hmm.
and for me, yeah, the thought of walking up 16 flights of stairs seems pretty outrageous. I don't think I could do it, or maybe in one day. But
Actually, I used to do that every day when I worked in downtown Denver. I had a 9-month contract job, and I think it was 16 floors. Yeah, I think it was 16 floors from the UC Denver, University of Colorado Denver campus building that I was in, where the administration offices were. And when it was snowy out and I didn't really feel like trudging around in the snow and freezing temperatures, I'd go up and down the stairwells, and that was about 16 floors. So this strikes me as kind of funny, but I suppose if I was, much older and infirm and unable to do that, I could certainly see the scariness factor. But um, it's certainly anything that we think is a threat on the level of form, it can only be in truth a reflection of our decision for separation, huh?
yes, exactly, exactly. And I always wondered, why couldn't somebody else just operate the elevator? I mean, can't you just push the button?
I know. Well, I think that maybe they would close them off if it was a union thing. I don't know.
That's pretty funny.
Yeah, yeah.
However, yeah. So,
Maybe she was afraid of being hurled into a different universe if she pressed the wrong button. I don't know.
well, that could very well be. It's possible. You never know. It seemed like a magic box. Oh, okay. Let's see. Let's see. Connie is saying, can you name the book chapter? I think, yeah, Bruce, maybe you mentioned that it's chapter 10 that we're in
Oh, in the yes, in the
the
print
Treeware
version,
version.
it's on page 326 on the version I have. So give or take, depending on which version you have, it's probably around there. And according to Lynn's uh, screen, we're at 64%, almost two-thirds of the way through the book. Page 313 of 492 in the digital version that Lynn has. So it's in the section that we started reading last week called The Continuation and Conclusion of the Course. And we've got about 4 pages left to go in this section. And then we start part 3. Do you want to pick up from there?
Sure. Excuse me. So Jesus's message was in part an attempt to help Helen realize that she need do nothing about any perceived problem, since in truth there is no real problem, quote, out there, unquote. The only problem that exists is our belief that we are separate from God, and this basic misperception must inevitably result in the misperception of everyone and everything. Reminds me of the intro to the lessons that we're doing.
Hmm.
Everything.
Very generalized, as in completely, right?
Yep, exactly. So, and in parentheses, he says, this does not mean incidentally that one should do nothing behaviorally, but rather that we should not act on our own without the Holy Spirit's help.
Mhm.
End of parentheses. In
In
this,
other words, do nothing with our mind on ego, doing nothing with mind in the ego switch position in our mind, which means do nothing with the assumption that sin, guilt, and fear are real, and the separation happened, and therefore we should cower and tremble um, in terror at this unconscious with this unconscious fear of this impossible crime.
exactly. And they used to play at the lounge at the Holiday Inn here in town, Cower and Tremble. And they were
Really, there's a song called that?
no, no, it was a couple,
Yeah.
married couple, yeah, Cower and Tremble. And
Oh,
they
was
played at
that
the
their actual
lounge.
names or was that their stage name?
No, I'm just kidding,
Oh,
obviously.
okay, okay, okay. You can say, well, it'd be a good name for an ego on steroids band, right?
Exactly. So, so, uh, so yeah. So as you were speaking about this, um, uh, when Ken says in this particular case, there is also no real problem externally since the
Mm-hmm.
elevators had continued to run normally. But in the reality of our experience of our world here, there's nothing going on at all.
Mm-hmm.
Not there, you can't do anything behaviorally because there is nothing happening. All of this that we're experiencing is a story that was written a long time ago, and
Mm-hmm.
we're just here watching it, but thinking that we are it, that we're doing it. But
Yeah.
really, on so many levels, this can be explained away or seen in a truer light. So, but of course, this was long ago, and Helen and Bill were just new with this, so that kind of generalization wasn't probably anything they thought about. But
Mm-hmm.
but maybe Helen did maybe think, hey, we moved to the hotel, we spent this money, we did this and that, and nothing really happened here.
Yeah.
That's
No
yeah,
harm, no harm was done. I mean, because no harm is possible in truth, right?
yeah,
It,
yeah,
it's just silly that the lengths that we go to avoid looking at the fear and really resolving it at the highest level, which is our decision for an insane thought system. Huh?
yeah, exactly. So let me continue reading here. The message also contained helpful information about the relationship between A Course in Miracles and other spiritual paths, which the interested reader may choose to consult in the text. Part of the message contained this important statement to Helen about avoiding judgment of other spiritualities, at the time pursuing the path that was hers. And this is a quote from the Course. Quote, "You are not making use of the Course if you insist on using means which have served others well, neglecting what was made for you," end quote. That's text chapter 18, section 7, paragraph 6, sentence 5. That message would be given to Helen again later on, years again, years later in another form, as we shall see in part 3. And Ken, through this book, he kind of forewarns us in part 3, and next you're going to hear this. So I always want to rush over there and look at it, but we're not going to. Yeah, but
Yeah, I was going to add to that quote, "You are not making use of this course if you insist on using means which have served others well, neglecting what was made for you." Um, that also resonates very nicely with um, it's something that another quote that Jesus gave to Helen. I think I'm not sure if it's in the course or if it's something similar, but I know Ken quotes it probably, and we've already read it or about to read it again. And it's never take another's path as your own, but neither should you judge it, or something like that. Yeah. Yeah, I
yes,
think I think that fits really nicely because it's like, we don't know what anyone else's atonement path is. We don't even know what's in our own mind. So our minds are so profoundly split most of the time, and that's what the course is helping us remedy is to look at what we've orphaned off and see that we've really literally pushed away everyone and everything out of our identity, and through the projection of unconscious unfounded guilt onto everyone and everything, needlessly, because it's not true, and it's not true out there, and it's not true in our own mind as well. So we just have to be willing to be gentle, patient, and tolerant of ourselves as we see ourselves and or others, making condemning statements or harboring those kind of thoughts, and just say, wow, that's just a silly, forgivable, fear-based reaction to an insane thought system, that is giving us fraudulent propaganda all the time.
all the time.
All
And
the time.
yeah, and it is a joke. When you start to be able to look at it and recognize, when Jesus says to us, it's a joke to think that time could come to circumvent eternity.
Hmm.
He's really saying it's a joke. It's this, this, this cannot be, this is not happening. There is no There is no problem. There's nothing to fear, and
Eh,
we can laugh at it.
It's true. And we also need to put in the very important caveat here that the Course doesn't suggest that we deny our experience. In fact, early in the text it says to deny your physical experience is a particularly unworthy form of denial, not only because it won't make us happy, but put in other ways, so we're depriving ourselves of the very classroom that we need to look at what we've projected out into the world. All the things that seem to push our buttons and upset us are really going on in our own mind. And until I bring those things back inside and withdraw my projections, so to speak, and undo the blame thrower that runs 24/7 and just say, wow, I've really needlessly accused my siblings of all kinds of crazy stuff when it's really my own doing. And my own doing is also part of a massive dream that really has not changed my identity of total innocence and your identity of total innocence, which includes everyone, right?
Yeah, yeah. We're just, kids playing in a school play, and we all have our part, and
Hmm.
that's it.
And if we don't look at the theatrics of our mind, and we'll never wake up from that theater, or we'll never leave the theater. We'll never wake up from the dream. We'll
Exactly.
never exit the movie that we star in and have identified with the character on the screen instead of the screenwriter.
Exactly. I mean, we paid the ticket and we went and sat down, and now all of a sudden we think we're it. But
And Jesus keeps saying, "Pass the popcorn."
pass the
This is a
popcorn.
movie. This is a movie.
Exactly. And this is again, we're beginning in the new year. We're restarting on the lessons.
Mhm.
The lesson that we have today is we're supposed to just for a minute just sit and look at our thoughts,
Mhm.
without thinking, without judgment, without fear. Just look at our thoughts,
Yep.
and that this is really what the whole point of all of this is. Look at these thoughts without judgment.
Mhm.
So yeah, I love this.
Yep.
So
And that lesson starts us out very, very gently and easily. I'm looking at paragraph 5, the last sentence says, "You are too inexperienced as yet to avoid a tendency to become pointlessly preoccupied." So if I can just kind of notice, oh yeah, I'm obsessing over this or that, and then drop it. If we can train our minds to just drop the things that we would otherwise mull over and beat to death by rehashing all the things that we don't like, and then our justifications and our snappy comebacks or arguments for why we were unjustly treated, and all those victimization stories. It's like if I can just kind of look at that and not go crazy and just say, oh yeah, there's a part of my mind that can look at that calmly and see how silly and forgivable that is.
yeah,
I
yeah,
just need to keep practicing that.
yeah. That's it. I mean, if you could just practice that,
Yeah,
that would be the end of it. It would be
right.
over.
Yeah. And my thoughts
Just
about anything in space-time don't couldn't possibly mean anything.
yeah, yeah. It's so simple.
If space
Uh,
and time are made up, so are my thoughts about them, right?
exactly. They're not even my thoughts.
Mhm.
They're not
But
even
I
my
but I
thoughts.
need to look at each one in order to free myself from the entanglement of my mind with the dream.
Exactly. And I was going to tell you, this morning when I read, I got to laugh at my own self. This morning when I read the lesson, I was offended. I
My
was,
thoughts don't mean anything. Who says that? How dare you?
when Jesus says you're not what is it he says you're not experienced enough yet to really get this or whatever.
Uh-huh.
It was
Right.
like, I've been doing this for years, Jesus. You know,
Hey, I'm past the 4 decade mark now, so how come I'm still having these crazy thoughts? Yeah,
oh
but
man.
but
Yeah,
that's not the idea. The idea is to it's not to shout down the ego. It's just to watch it disappear over time by looking at it without condemnation. Right?
exactly. Yeah.
And it doesn't matter how long it takes. It's a happy inevitability. So we don't need to really be concerned about the outcome. That's a done deal. Because the ego never happened, nor did the world that it seems to be projecting still.
Yeah. Exactly. But here we are.
Yeah, seem to be.
Seem to be. Okay, I'm going to continue reading.
Okay.
Uh, this is just so fascinating. On
Hmm.
March 11th, 1968, um, Helen wrote down another special message whose circumstances are unknown to me. It originally was placed in the midst of, let me move this, in the midst of the section entitled The Alternate to Dreams of Fear, between the words must be a dream and cannot be the truth, and you have conceived a little gap. It was later put in chapter 22 as the first two paragraphs at the beginning of the branching of the road. It is virtually in the printed text as it was given to Helen. And in case folks are wondering, wow, why he gave it to her in this sequential order and it was linear, and why are they moving it around and putting it here and there? Helen asked Jesus. Jesus told her where to put things.
Hmm.
It was
Hmm.
not that she was messing around with, I think this would sound better over here or over there. And in fact, anytime she put in her 2 cents, Jesus was pretty clear, whose book is this after all?
Hmm.
And because she did talk about this, that if she decided something else sounded better, she would put it in, and then she would very quickly be told by Jesus, no, that's not where that belongs, or that's not what that
Hmm.
is, or that's not what I
Not what I
said,
meant. Uh-huh.
what I meant, and
Hmm.
she would have to go and fix it. And I know, I am, I've heard anecdotally, that many times I heard her say it herself in that little interview that we have with her speaking, that he told her, right off, go fix that. But also from our friend John Mundy, who was with her much of the time, who
Hmm.
spent time with Helen, was her, like, I don't know, surrogate son or whatever. And she gave him advice about girlfriends and all sorts of stuff. And he said, yeah, they asked Jesus every single thing. So if there's any question about why this was put here or there, which I know people have questioned it and people have rewritten it, and maybe Jesus told them to do that too. I don't know. But I know that the version that we read from the FIP that Helen uh, edited with Jesus is the form in which Jesus intended it to be for us at
Hmm.
this time.
Yep.
So
Yep.
so
The scribe authorized version, as they say.
yeah. Um, and Connie said in the chat that Bill was only completely free right when he passed. Yeah, that's what we tend to believe, is that on that July 4th he was free free from the story. So okay, so continuing to read. On July 19th, 1968, shortly before the text was completed, Helen wrote down this message for herself about the importance of not judging within the context of her functioning as a psychologist. And so this is Helen's notes. As you see him, you will see yourself, whether this be through the use of psychological tests or by making judgment in some other way, the effect is still the same. Whenever you have judged anyone, it is impossible for you not to make this judgment on yourself.
Hmm.
Oh, I'm going to repeat that. Whenever you have judged
I
anyone,
think it's only repeated about 1,000 times in the course in different ways, right?
I, but it's
Just
still like
just
a
just a
no-no
few
here.
repetitions needed.
What I'm doing to you, I'm doing to myself. When you have judged
Hmm.
anyone, it is impossible for you not to make this judgment on yourself. If you see one of your brothers who happens to be a patient as exhibiting signs of a thought disorder, then you will experience this same disorder in your own perception. For whatever your thought may be about anyone determines how you will respond and react to yourself and everyone around you. Take heed then, when you are called upon to fulfill your function as teachers, that you teach the truth about God's Son. The only way that you can experience any peace while this unfortunate necessity for interpreting illusions remains is to recognize that you are discussing only illusions and that this has no real meaning at all. Try to say a prayer for your brother while doing this, and you will call forth and experience a miracle instead. So, wow, yeah, this is just it's huge to me
Hmm.
because, Jesus is just telling whatever I'm thinking about my brother, whatever I'm thinking about the world, whatever I'm thinking about anything, it's an illusion, has
Hmm.
no real meaning at all. And to say a prayer while I'm doing it and call forth and experience a miracle instead. So
And
that's a turning point right there.
yeah, I was just going to add the prayer wouldn't be to change the other person, it would be to change my mind about how I look at the other person, which is basically because everyone that I think is in my world really exists in my mind. And that's one of the things that modern physics, found so shocking to the people who pioneered quantum mechanics in the last century. They realized that they could no longer separate mind because, essentially our perceptions determine what we call physical reality, which is really just happening in the mind. And I mean, a lot of physicists won't put it quite that way, but that's kind of what the implications were. And that's why so many of them became mystics almost of necessity, because they realized, they can't, sweep mind under the rug anymore. It's an integral part of the scientific process.
Yeah, exactly. And then you think about people like David Bohm, who
Hmm.
had a long relationship with Krishnamurti,
Right, right.
because he recognized from his scientific observations
Hmm.
that there was something else going on here, and the only way you could explain it was through this particular. I mean, that it made sense that in this particular non-dual. Uh, uh, Thought system that science and religion came together in the same place.
Yep.
Science and spiritual belief came together in the same place. So yeah, that's beautiful. And so this is I call this the reciprocal, the law of reciprocal forgiveness. Um, because when I attack my brother, I attack myself. When I
Hmm.
forgive my brother, I forgive myself.
Right.
Because we are one and the same. So because there is no separation between us, that these whatever I judge in another is something that I'm judging in myself. And if I can only do it like, Byron Katie, her work, she goes to the turnaround, where you say, how am I doing this to myself? And when you begin to practice that and see how clearly it is, then for me, when I start this, stream of judgment that comes into my mind when I look at the news or talk to people in my family or whatever it is that starts me on this path, I can easily stop and say, how how am I doing this? How am I doing this too? And doing this to
Hmm.
myself? And I
Hmm.
see Connie has her hand up. Connie, would you like to say something?
Yes, this has been a really big confusing thing for me lately. And I just typed in a question, so just ignore that. Because I forgot I could raise my hand. Uh, so does that mean that when Helen was acting as a psychologist and talking to a patient, she could not diagnose them, or she needed to just ask the Holy Spirit for forgiveness when she diagnosed them? Because there really are people with psychological problems. I mean, I know we're all insane. I'm really not sure how to say what I'm trying to say.
Hmm.
Because I had an experience a while back where I met this person, and kind of something tweaked in me that something's not right here. You know what I mean? But I'm not a psychologist, obviously, so I wasn't really sure. But I have been around for a while, and I was trying not to be judgmental, but it wasn't like I could deny it either. You know what I mean? So I
Yeah.
have had a big confusion with that.
Yeah, I think you're onto something there, Connie, because yes, just because it was Helen's profession to diagnose people, and I guess you would think that a diagnosis is a type of a judgment, but I also think that, if you could, like, you could say a chair is a chair or a dog is a dog, you can look at those things and say, and you are insane because you display this kind of behavior that's been defined by the community of psychologists or by the world as insane. uh, you know you could maybe say that it's maybe not. I don't even know how to explain how to say what I'm thinking here. So you brought me into a place where I thought that have no meaning. But I do get that if she saw it in them, she had to see it in herself.
Mhm.
Well,
And
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 what's
I
so
mean
weird, because I mean, I knew all of this. So when I was seeing it, and I was saying, well, gosh, if I see that in him, I see that in me. Well, that's pretty frightening.
well,
However, I was like, but I really don't think I'm that way. So now I'm like the dog chasing my tail. I'm like, wait a minute. And then I'm like, is this the ego that's sending me on a wild goose chase? Or is this the Holy Spirit saying, look, trust me, Connie, I don't think you're judging this person, but you do know that this is, you know, something. I don't know. I don't want to say not normal behavior, because then you go down that road again. You know what I mean? I mean, I really and still am working my way out of that whole conundrum.
yeah,
May I
well,
respond
yeah,
to that?
yeah. Go ahead, please.
Well, I was just gonna, thanks, Connie, for bringing that up. That I think that's a really important question, and it's easy to think, well, I'm seeing some kind of, abnormal behavior or psychology, manifested in the world. And one of the things that um, I think Ken Wapnick points out in his work in numerous places is that, just because you see a particular form of behavior doesn't mean that you have the same behavior in terms of the form, but the content is always the same. I mean, there's really only two thought systems.
Right.
Excuse me, there's
God
either,
bless
there's
you.
either love or fear, right? So if I'm involved in the ego thought system, which is fearful, I'm going to see that projected onto everyone and everything. But the form may be very different. I mean, an axe murderer and a rapist and a person who cheats on their taxes, may be different behaviors. Um, but it's the same thought system of duality and treachery and violence and so forth and so on. It's the insanity is the same, even if the form can be very, very different. And it could be just something as being mildly annoyed at a mosquito, but it's the course says there's no order of difficulty in miracles, and there's no order of insanity in the ego. So I try to remember it's to bring it back from the form to the level of content. Another thing that I think was really helpful that's in the psychotherapy pamphlet that um, I think applies to all of us, and it was certainly meant not just for Helen and Bill because they were in that profession, but for all of us, is that it was the line something to the effect of healing begins when the therapist forgets to judge the patient.
And
And so
and
it's
that was what was so weird is, I mean, all this, the information we're just talking about was
uh,
going through my head. So,
yeah, yeah,
but when the person actually, and I'm going to give some details because I obviously I'm trying really hard, really hard
sure.
to
Uh-huh.
wiggle out of this, or really come to terms with the truth that I know the Holy Spirit wants me to see. And I'm not doing very good by myself because I'm chasing my tail. But at one point, we were at church one day, and I said, come over here, let's sit with a friend. And a few days later, he said that I said to him, get your GD ass over here, sit your effing self down, and I'm sick of your shit. And I looked at him and I said, do what? I said, you, I said, let me just ask you a question. I put my hand at his ear and I said, your ears heard my voice say that? And he said, yes. And I asked him 3 times. And he said, yes. And I said, I'm sorry, I don't know if I did the right thing or not, but I said, I just can't help you. I need to get away now, and I will talk to you at some point in the future. And goodbye. And I turned around and walked off because I just didn't know what to do with that. Because I just really, honest to God, I was like, I have moved around in this whole conversations with you through these years, trying to keep God with me in it and the Holy Spirit with me in it. And I just couldn't seem to get it. I don't know. And that's why I got all wiggled out.
Yeah. The course certainly doesn't advocate that we not be normal. And if someone's being physically or verbally abusive, there's nothing in the course that says I have to stick it out or tough it out or hang in there. You know, if it's inappropriate, there's nothing wrong with just saying I'm out of here. You know, if there's abuse on any level, but at the same time, no
It
matter
was my
what's
thought.
happening, it's always an opportunity to look what's going on in my mind, right, and just see why am I reacting to X, Y, or Z that's going on. And I think we're all, you know, if we're honest with ourselves, doing that on a moment to moment basis, if we're serious about applying the course. And it seems like the other thing that Jesus said to Helen about what to say, you know, in response to, you know, there's a different situation than one you just described. But and there was I believe the story was a young woman that was having some trouble, and you know, she wanted to ask Jesus, what should I say to this young woman? And the response was something to the effect of, help me, you know, ask to help me see this person the way you do, rather than trying to figure out what to say. And if we see everyone that we meet or think about through the eyes of the Holy Spirit, you know, we'll see the innocence. And to get to that point, we have to be willing to look at, as Ken Wapnick points out so frequently and eloquently, we have to be willing to look at how much we don't want to see the innocence, because we really want to maintain the guilt because it keeps our separate identity. And that's that deeper level of practicing the course that says, yeah, that fifth stage in the development of trust, of wanting to let go of being a separate self and defending that in so many different ways. You know, that's not an easy thing to do. It's ultimately the most simple thing we can do, but it's very challenging. We need to be, you know, infinitely patient with ourselves and everyone we meet or think about. Ultimately, I hope that
Well,
helps.
that was
Yeah, I found that helpful anyway over the years, and I'm still practicing it as much as I can, and I think more and more every day.
that all ran through my mind through this whole experience.
Yeah.
I mean, I really did, you know, I kept Jesus, the course, you know, teachings in front of my mind all the time. And
Uh-huh.
there were other attack times, you know, he would come at me, he'd be like, what are you, stupid? And I'd say, you want to back up and try that again? And because we're not going to get anywhere like this. And then he would come back again and say, and he'd come back in another way. But I just said somewhere along the way, I don't know if my message from Jesus is that sometimes you do have to take care of yourself.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. There's no suggestion, of course, that we become masochistic or, you know, indulge in sacrifice. I mean, but ultimately the real sacrifice, and in this last, you know, season, I shared a couple of things online with Christmas is the end of sacrifice. It's such a great section because the end of sacrifice is the end of the idea of sacrifice, which is the end of the idea that we're separate from each other and from our Creator. That's the one sacrificial idea that the Course asks us to look at and ultimately let go.
End of sacrifice. That was probably the best. That was good
Yeah.
because at the last meeting that I had, because we'd stayed in business after I finally said, look, you know, well, he actually stopped everything because it was another crazy thing that didn't happen. And I was just like, well, this is fine, you know. And I said, you know, we'll do this business we have. And then And then I realized that that also was taking such a toll. And I'm like, this just can't be what Jesus is wanting for me. And then the
Yeah.
last meeting I
Yep.
had, it was, and when I went to that meeting, all the way over there, I'm like, Jesus, I'm listening to anything you have to say to me, and I want to see your love in him the whole time I'm there.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Connie. That's a really helpful question. I think it's one that we all address in so many different ways, and 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 it, yeah, very relevant to everyone. So anyway,
I'm
and I
sorry.
need to scoot off to another meeting. So anyway, thank you all. Have a great new year, and I look forward to continuing the conversation next week. So
All right.
Sorry
thanks all.
about
Bruce, I,
that so much.
I think maybe we might go ahead and continue reading till the end of the period, and then I'll just catch you up to where we're at next week when you come back. Yep. Oh, he's gone. Okay. So yeah, he teaches at the School for A Course in Miracles. So they were having something going on today. We're a busy crew here, so but yeah, Connie, I really, I think that yeah, there's no, if if you think, a person is not just you're not helping them, and it's not helping you, there's no reason to continue to be in a situation. And of course, you may, think that you're being abused. And of course, we recognize I can only abuse myself. No one else can really do that. That's my job. Um, and but obviously, clearly, you two were in a maybe parallel um, universes, but not the same. Where you weren't in the same place. If you were saying one thing and he was hearing something different, and there's that happens a lot. In fact, I think in general nobody really hears what anybody actually says. We hear what our mind tells us through our experiences and through our relationships with other people, things that have happened to us. The last time somebody said something like this to me, this was what happened. And, we have all these uh, uh, filters that we put stuff through to help us interpret whatever is happening in our world. And if my filter is that you're going to say rude things to me and tell me to get my A over here and all that, then that's what I'm going to hear, even if you say please and thank you, and and you're the most loving thing in the world. If I want to hear abuse, I'm going to hear abuse. And so
Well,
having that reflected back to me and being told, yeah, this is what you said, when I know darn well that I would never have said a thing like that, that would definitely trigger something in me for sure. I think I think my
well,
ego would not be happy with that.
I can honestly say that I wasn't necessarily triggered again, because I mean I'm sitting there. I feel like I've got Jesus right there, because I'm like, Jesus, you got to help me with this, because I'm just not. I don't know. I just don't flat out know. But and I said that to him one day. I said, why do you want to hear, or why do you want to see me in this light when that is not what is really happening? And he didn't ever answer me. So but eventually I just could see that nothing was really progressing, and it was distressful, and I was just like, but it was just a strange situation, and I don't mind learning. I don't want to go through these lessons again. I've seen Groundhog Day. um and I want to learn everything I need to learn to be better and to get to heaven.
That's it,
I
exactly.
just thought my
So
lesson
yeah,
there was is get out.
don't take it personally because there's no person here.
Right.
So so I think I'm going to continue reading.
Oh,
We'll just go to the bottom of the hour, and then we have another group that starts at 11:30. So and that's a great group you're going to really love too. So Ken continues. Uh, This certainly does not mean that psychologists, and this kind of answers your question here, that psychologists should stop their worldly functioning, but rather that they should continue their work without taking their professional form seriously. Jesus thus was not telling Helen and Bill to cease their work, but simply to be aware that they were discussing only illusions. Thus, they should use the illusion of psychological theory as the vehicle for teaching the content of truth. In other words, Jesus is telling all of us that it is our thoughts about our work that must shift, not necessarily the work itself. As the workbook would later advise us about bringing the light of truth into the world of darkness. And then this is from lesson 184. And then step back to darkness, in brackets, from the light, not because you think it real, but only to proclaim its unreality in terms which still have meaning in the world that darkness rules. And so then Ken continues. Therefore, we do not stop making whatever personal and professional judgments are relevant to our functioning in the world. We but carry them out without condemnation and attack. Borrowing from the words of the gospel frequently alluded to by Jesus in the Course, we are being taught how to be in the world, yet always remembering that we are not of it. And of course, we say that all the time, in the world, but not of it. So I think really what Jesus is telling Helen and what Ken is implying here is that, if the world says that if, I have, uh, you know, I think about committing suicide every day. I have suicidal ideation. That's something you can define. You can tell a psychologist, this is what I'm thinking. The psychologist doesn't have to say, oh, I'm thinking about killing myself every day. This is what's going on in my mind too, because I'm hearing it from you. Even though they could very easily look at that and say, in what ways am I doing the same thing? And maybe both would be healed at the same time, once they're able to see that that there's only one mind, only one ego. So whatever they're hearing from their patients can be an indication to them of where they need to work on, the triggers they need to work on. And I see that all the time. I constantly now, when someone comes to me with a problem, and a lot of folks do come to me and say, Lynn, I'm worried about this, or I'm thinking about this, or, my spouse did this, or whatever it is, the problems that they come to me with. Um, I do look within and ask, in what way am I doing this? In what way am I seeing this in my own life? In what way am I thinking about this? Because if I heal myself, then the situation is healed. It would only be coming to me. Of course, Jesus wasn't talking to Helen and Bill in this way at this time. But if it's coming to me, we know now because it's for me. So if I'm seeing someone who seems to have a problem, I can look within and see where I think I have the same problem. Maybe not in the same form, maybe not in not dealing with people, but dealing with a situation or dealing with my job or whatever. I can see that those things are happening in my own experience, and I can allow myself to be healed from that thought. And in healing myself, the other person experiences the same healing. And, I believe, and this is, of course, my own perception of the Course, I believe that when we, as teachers of God, we as, students or teachers of A Course in Miracles, however you want to describe yourself, when you begin to see that whatever it is that's coming to is a projection of your own thinking, and you're willing to give those thoughts up to the Holy Spirit to be healed, then it not only heals your mind, my mind, it heals the world. And that's really the point of all of it, is that, we let go of our own personal connection to it and recognize that when I'm healed, I'm not healed alone. And Connie has posted in here that I think I needed to know I could trust myself in Jesus in the situation. Yes, absolutely. If that's what you got out of it, that is what you needed to learn about it. I love that. Thank you. So, being in the world, but not of the world is what we're being taught throughout the course. So let's see on to the next page. And this is Ken continuing. This is astonishing. Reading this book has been astonishing for me because, I've said this before. I read this when I first started studying the course. I probably had been studying the course for maybe a year or two when I read this, because I was interested in, what, the scribe, and I was impressed and whatever. But now, after I've been studying the course for so many years, to go back and reread the book, and to see the conversations that Helen had with Jesus, the things that he told her that directly were never in the notes, that came just, he would just dictate it to her. She would just say the words and Bill would type them up. So many incredible messages that came that way. And that people think, well, I have a copy of her notes, I should be able to suss this out. Well, it's not all in her notes. There's a lot of it that is just direct fed from Jesus into her, out her mouth, where Jesus is saying to her, Helen, you are doing this and Bill is doing that. And she would say those words, Helen, you're doing this and Bill's doing that, and Bill would be typing it up just as she was saying it. So it was not, there was no filter from what was coming through directly from Jesus. And so, I find these things just so fascinating, and how beautiful it is. And of course, Helen said, he would talk to you just like this if you would let him. If you would listen, he'd be talking to you like this right now, which I find, again, really fascinating and beautiful. So, so as the dictation of A Course in Miracles went on, Helen began to wonder when, or perhaps even if, it would ever end. Here is her account. Here is her account from the autobiography. Several times, this is Helen, before the end, I told Bill I thought things were winding up, but I was wrong. Then I began to wonder how I would know when it was really finished. I was given the answer. I would know when it used the word amen. I still felt it was over before the word was actually used. And in brackets, Ken says, I recall Helen's telling me that one such time was at the beginning of what would be the final section of the text, at the words, quote, for he has come and he is asking this, unquote, end of Ken's insert. But it was not until the paragraph that begins, and now we say amen, that I knew the text was ended. And so this, because I've read the word amen, in the course, it's in a lot of things, but and now we say amen. It was when she knew that was it for the text. And then she said to Bill, I have the what is it, the bad feeling that there's going to be a workbook. She was not excited about that part. And I don't know, have y'all heard that interview with Helen? I don't know if that's been around a lot. Connie, have you heard that?
I don't remember if I've heard a lot of the recordings, but I don't know if I've heard that one.
I might just I'm going to mark the book so we
Okay.
don't get too far. And I'm going to get that interview and play it for you, because if it's really, no, please don't. Joni's note taker is coming in. Okay. Let me go find that and
Oh, thank you. Yes.
I'll play it, and I think you're going to be. It's really fascinating to hear Helen in her own. Oh, if I spelled it correctly, it would actually probably come up. Helen in her own words, talking about her hearing Jesus. And she's being interviewed by a reporter for a magazine. Here we go. Well, let's see. I should have just put that over there. Okay. All right. Let me stop the share. And we have other folks that are going to be coming in. So, share. All right.
Regarding the voice you heard in describing A Course in Miracles, does it come from outside or from within?
There's nothing that I would call ordinary audition about this at all. It doesn't really... It's a curious thing, and it will be very difficult to explain. Somebody asked me, was it as though your hand was moving? No, I wrote perfectly voluntarily in response to. I call it a voice, but a voice has sounds as though it had something to do with hearing. I didn't hear anything. I think it's a sort of hearing that you can't really describe. It doesn't have anything to do with ears or waves hitting a drum or anything on that order. I don't really know. I think maybe I'm using the wrong word when I say hear. I sort of recognized it. It was very rapid. I could even, if I didn't catch a phrase, I could sort of say, would you mind doing that again, you know?
This was in your mind?
This is strictly mental. Otherwise, I would consider it hallucinatory activity. I don't feel it was that.
Is it comparable to anything in terms of how we hear ourselves talk, or like you talk to yourself?
It wasn't my voice. It couldn't have been, because it talked about a whole area with which I am entirely unfamiliar.
What about subvocalizing? When you're subvocalizing, you're hearing the words. You're actually hearing them.
No, there's no vocalization. It's a process that I really would find impossible to explain. It's never happened to me before. I don't have any knowledge of the area, so that I wouldn't be able to say like X or whatever it is, because I wouldn't know what X did.
You could hear the words clearly in your mind, even though you didn't hear a sound?
I knew that that was the word. I think knew may be a better word than heard. I did not know consciously at the beginning of the sentence how it was going to end, and that puts me under a further handicap in terms of ordinary language, because ordinarily, I think, if you're going to say a sentence, you know what it's going to be. You sort of get the gestalt immediately. But I didn't. And it came very easily, very rapidly, very smoothly, I guess even painlessly, except that it annoyed me to death, but that's irrelevant. I guess here isn't the right word. I could stop any time or pick it up any time, and I did in cabs and subways and anything, or sort of between telephone calls. But you're raising a question I don't think, Dave, I can answer. I really am trying.
So a certain mechanism went on there, because you heard something, translated into the shorthand style.
Yes, but I'm used to shorthand. I use it for group therapy sessions, so that shorthand is quite familiar to me.
So you don't even
It was really a matter of speed.
So you really
I couldn't have kept up with it in ordinary writing.
Oh, you couldn't?
Oh, no, it's very rapid. I needed the shorthand.
What about automatic writing? A thing when pen takes over and writes for the person. The person doesn't have any control. Is that similar to what you're describing?
No, that didn't happen at all. I could have stopped at any kind, and I frequently did. And I was very frequently interrupted, so that I would have to stop there. I didn't lose awareness of where I was or what I was doing. My interns kept barging in for therapy sessions. Now, Bill always says, well, I'm just naturally dissociated, which I never take as a compliment. But maybe it's that. And I think in a sense it must be, because I haven't caught up with it yet. And I don't understand it, and I still feel very baffled by it. And I'm also still just a little uncomfortable with the material, but I'm getting used to it now. And I'm also getting used to a feeling that it was the right thing to have done. The only curious thing that I do know, and this is curious, I am used to doing pretty much what I want to, and I do make my own decisions. But for some reason or other, it never occurred to me not to do this. I thought that this should be done. I made every effort to keep it without me. I did not want to intrude on it, and I felt that it was a matter of personal integrity not to. I really did not interfere with it. I think the thing that I found upsetting about it was it went against everything I believed, which is very hard to do. But I felt it was much more important. I know what I believe, but I didn't know what this was going to do next. And I was very pleased with its coherence and with its being very consistent, which is something that I would regard as a mandatory criterion. It read very well.
Yeah.
And I know the pain with which I managed to get something to read halfway as well as that, which is very agonizing. And this came out very quickly, talked about a system I don't know anything about, and confused me no end. I'm still cross-eyed. That's all I can really say about it.
Tried to edit it at times, didn't you?
Yes, I did. It would bother me, and I would never forget what it was originally, and I would feel kind of uneasy about it. But since I do so much editing, I figured, well, I'm improving this, you know, and that's it. But then later, when it would pick it up again and refer back to that, then it would be inconsistent because it would use the original word. So then I very quickly learned, don't do that because you will interfere with the internal consistency. So then I stopped doing that. Very quickly I learned that that was a very bad mistake. So we went back and we changed all the words back into its original form.
Did you remember the word, or did you have to go back and just ask at the time?
And I used to tell Bill that used to be, you know, whatever it was. But sometimes, I wouldn't say more than 2 or 3 times, I didn't know. But I was aware that there was a goof-off in through there, and I would feel the goof-off more than the right answer. And then I would sort of look at a blackboard so in my head and see it written, the word it should have been. And I would ask, can I see it on the blackboard?
You would ask and also see it?
Yes, if I was undecided. I'd forgotten to mention that.
Would there also be that knowingness that accompanies it like?
No, then I would be reading it, because on the blackboard I would see it in letters.
Then it was a very visual thing in your mind.
And then it was visual. Ordinarily it isn't. But I think that modality had to come in where I had kind of lost my way in it, and I really didn't know what the word should be.
Could you close this off any time you didn't want to hear or do it?
Oh, yes.
In other words, it was strictly your option.
Oh, very much. Except that it kind of nudges me if I didn't do it. When I was sort of supposed to, sometimes I couldn't sleep. And then I would become very restless, and at one point I didn't do it for about 3 weeks. I felt quite pushed around by this, and enough is enough. And it was kind of a rough 3 weeks. But I didn't know when it was finished, and I didn't know when I was supposed to stop. The course came first. Well, the text is what we originally had called the course. The text is the right word for it. That came first, and when that was through, I think there was something like a 3-month hiatus.
You had no urge to write then?
A while before I started in again, I said to Bill and also to Jonathan, I have a horrible feeling there's a workbook that goes with this, but maybe it's just a, you know, maybe I'm going to be let off on this one. But I did know it, and it became increasingly clear that that was it. And I knew at that time there would also be a teacher's manual, because that's obviously what professors have to teach with. And I did feel that it was going to organize itself in that way. And it did.
Do you feel that it's over now?
I think so. I think so. The only thing that I might be able to do, although I would hesitate to do it, because I feel very strongly that my commitment included having nothing to do with anything psychic. I feel that very strongly. I think I told you the story of the original commitment in that line. If I didn't, it's in my autobiography, and you'll see it. I think it's through. I do think, and under certain circumstances, I might be able to do this and might want to, if it were very helpful to somebody. I think there are questions I could probably write an answer to. But I think I would really want to do that, not as a major part of anything, because I don't think it's very important, but if someone were in trouble and it would be helpful, I might try to do it. I haven't had any occasion yet.
So you continue to hear the voice?
Oh no, I could ask what to do about something, particularly if the three of us are together. And we would ask, and we would get an answer. We generally get the same answer. If we don't, we'll sort of feel somebody's off a little bit, and we'll try again. But we generally do. According to the course, we should, and everyone could, ask about anything and get an answer. Sometimes it's very surprising to me, and one of the things that I think we mistakenly do is to figure, oh, well, this is unimportant, or this is, you know, this, or to cut out certain areas from the process of asking, which I'm sure is a mistake, because I don't think we should evaluate. I think you can ask anything. And I would doubt very much if anything is likely to happen to me that wouldn't happen to anybody else. If he wanted it to. I mean, or if he felt this was the way he wanted to go. I can't imagine that. In fact, I'm sure it isn't true. The Course is rather explicit on that.
So you do hear now and then?
I hear whenever I ask.
In other words, at this point now, it's really a matter of asking.
Well, now it's a little more a question of personal guidance as to what to do. We didn't know whether we were supposed to come here, for example, so we asked about that. And we all three thought we should come to California. This was not where we intended to go. And we did feel that Judy sort of came, you know, at a particular time. We felt very much that she was an integral part of this. But we asked for this because I've been very, very careful about this. I am a very careless person in some ways. I lose everything. But I never lost anything of this course. People would stop me in the subway and say, "Miss, you forgot your something or other," and hand it back to me. Taxis would honk their horns, you know, say you left something in the back seat. My secretary would say, "You sure this belongs in this case report? Doesn't sound right." And it was impossible to lose this course, and I tried. But it sort of kind of followed me around in an odd kind of way. People would send it back to me, anything, you know, and I always got it back. And we never lost anything, which is incredible for me. You have to know me because I really do lose anything. We once went to a game thing, you know, where you had to guess from a one-sentence thing who it was, and somebody said, "My God, where is it?" And the whole faculty said, "Helen Schuckman." They recognized it immediately. I'm better now. I think this has been a good experience.
You're the absent-minded professor type?
No more. Now I'm just absent-minded.
All right, so that was the voice of Helen Schuckman talking to a reporter about scribing A Course in Miracles. And I find that just astonishing. So, and I'm going